Hello everyone. I was watching a video on the YouTube channel World of Antiquity by Professor David Miano, and it inspired the creation of this video. David is sharing a list of words that are commonly used by pseudo-archaeologists, and I'd like to talk about three of the words on his list. Those three are gradualism, catastrophism, and mainstream. Here's what David has to say about gradualism and catastrophism.
Um,
Huh.
Gradualism refers to the mainstream idea that technology gradually progresses over time. And they're like, oh, gradualism is not true because they give us the opposite, catastrophism, which is the idea that you can have high technology and then you can go way down to nothing and then you can come back up again and then go down. So they speak of gradualism as being in error, Oh, the
Interesting.
mainstream, they assume gradualism is true.
So what is really interesting here is that I have heard catastrophism used more often in a geological context rather than a technological one. Within the context of alternative ancient history, it might be appropriate to speak of technology rising and falling due to cataclysm. But does catastrophism itself belong on a list of words commonly used in pseudo-archaeology? While Professor Miano correctly qualifies his statement, saying that these words can have legitimate usage elsewhere, in this case, catastrophism can have legitimate usage within the field of archaeology itself, so I think its presence on this list might cause too much legitimate confusion. So this made me realize that this topic needs further clarity. This is the Wikipedia page for catastrophism, and we see that catastrophism theorizes that the Earth has largely been shaped by sudden, short-lived, violent events, possibly worldwide in scope. This contrasts with uniformitarianism, which is sometimes called gradualism. So if you subscribe to a historical narrative that includes civilization or cities before the last great cataclysm, then this fits very nicely with David's description. But when I talk about catastrophism and gradualism, or uniformitarianism, I'm focusing more on the catastrophe than the technology, which we find discussed further down the page. What really is uniformitarianism, and why is it so important to know? From around 1850 to 1980, most geologists endorsed uniformitarianism, or the present is the key to the past, and gradualism, or geologic change occurs slowly over periods of time, and rejected the idea that cataclysmic events such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or floods of vastly greater power than observed at the present time played a significant role in the Earth's surface. Now, comparing catastrophe with uniformitarianism, the key difference between them is uniformitarianism observes the existence of vast timelines, whereas catastrophism does not. So this is where it gets really interesting. And next we read that today, most geologists combine catastrophism and uniformitarianist standpoints, taking the view that Earth's history is a slow, gradual story punctuated by catastrophic events. But wait a minute, wasn't that the description for catastrophism? Proponents of catastrophism propose that each geological epoch, or long period of time, ended with catastrophe, and all life in affected parts of the world became extinct.
66 million years ago, we happened to have an incredible pile of flood basalts in India. Is it a coincidence they're at exactly the same time that all these dinosaurs and 75% of all genus disappear from the planet? 251 million years ago, another major change in our fossil record. Age of the flood basalts in Russia, in Siberia. So there's another tremendous mass extinction 201 million years ago. There's another mass extinction. There's only 5 major ones in our history, and 3 of them happen to be associated with these flood basalts.
So it seems like they're saying that the current scientific consensus is catastrophism. If you're now confused, good. It means you've been trying to follow their logic. Uniformitarianism rejects the idea of cataclysms larger than those seen today, because today is the present, which is supposed to be the key to their past. If something cataclysmic happened in the past that does not happen today, it creates a problem for uniformitarianism. Catastrophism and uniformitarianism are mutually exclusive because of the time involved, and more specifically, the time it takes to deposit each layer of strata. Said plainly, the forces involved in uniformitarianism are not sufficient as a mechanism to explain what is observed. So how long does strata take to form during a catastrophe?
There's debate about how long each flow lasts. We're probably talking about days to maybe a couple of weeks, Marty. That's the conventional thought. Okay, this is going to get good.
So in a catastrophic setting, these layers do not take thousands of years to form. In other words, and this is key, the strata no longer represents the time that was originally attributed to it. Let's look at a diagram to assist in better understanding the problem raised here. This is a diagram of some strata from one of Nick's videos on floods of water and lava. And we see some dates on the left to give us some idea of where we are in time. So as kids, we are taught that these many layers of strata took long ages to form. So if this were the starting point for tracking time at 0 million years, this would take 1 million years to accumulate. This would take another 3 million years to accumulate, and another 1 million years for this portion of the column to form on top. So now we see that the time to form these basalt flows is in the order of days to weeks. So the problem for uniformitarianism is their evidence is being reinterpreted. As scientists are taking more evidence into account, it's removing significant portions of evidence for deep time. Even though a major portion of this deposit is clearly catastrophic, the time labels remain very much the same as they were before. These numbers depict ages in millions of years. Why do these numbers look so familiar to all of us if we now know the layers all formed rapidly? What's the justification for time between, say, 2 lava flows?
Yeah. Now, after each eruption, we have a lunar-like landscape. This is Hawaii with no plants and animals on this featureless plain. That's what we can picture almost every one of these eruptions of our lavas. We're pretty sure we have thousands of years, at minimum, thousands of years between eruptions. This is not, Monday, here comes one, Tuesday, here comes one. These fissures are making these lavas, and there's enough time to develop a whole ecosystem before the next lava comes. That's why we have petrified wood and other remnants of these older times.
That sounds like a pretty good explanation. But Nick is a great teacher, and one of the things I learned from him is that when a lava flow comes in contact with water, it creates pillowy regions of obsidian.
And this is one lava flow. Here's another. Next one, Bryce. This is the flow top. And this orangey junk at the bottom tells us something about what the land was like when this lava flow came in. Next one. Look at the scale of this orangey stuff. And, almost a quarter of the lava flow is this orange material. What is it?
And the petrified logs and other plant material are found only in these pillowy regions.
These pillows tell us that the lava went into a lake of some sort, went into some body of water. But if you find a pillow zone and you know that there's some holes, you go crawl in the holes and you find petrified logs. They're right there.
This is important because it shows the trees were in water or underwater when they were encapsulated by quickly cooling lava making contact with the water. And look at the size of those lava flows. Look at the size of that water column this lava flow hit. So what is the problem? The problem is the state of the logs at the moment of their deposition. Notice they are branchless, rootless, and without bark.
But quite often those logs are coming right out of the pillow zone. A little idea of the variety of the wood. I've already made this point, but you can look at the literature and realize that the list is endless, just crazy variety. And the idea then is that if we are involving these lahars, if we are involving this transportation agent getting all these logs together, we maybe did have a lake in the vantage area with logs in the water. Again, the water's present, the logs are present, but they all aren't right there in a forest, right there at vantage.
So they did not have branches, roots, or bark because they were not a local forest. They were already in a log mat rubbing this material off long before the lava flow showed up. And this is not necessarily evidence for a forest or habitat in this area, because as he explains, these logs were transported here by water, probably catastrophically. So this was nothing like we see today. Remember that uniformitarianism holds that such large catastrophes cannot happen because it would account for too much of the world's Earth history and condense the time. Just how big was this catastrophe?
You find it in purely oceanic settings. And yet we have these oceanic lavas coming out of our cracks here. It's a mystery. And I'm not presenting it as a mystery just for us. It's still a mystery. Each flow is the height of this building on average. So if we go to Hawaii, a place where we can understand how this process works, it's the right chemistry, it's the right physical properties at a small scale, but the Hawaiian lava flows are knee-high and travel just a couple of miles. These individual flows are 40 feet high and travel 300 miles. The scale is way off the charts.
So this brings us to our third word from David's list, mainstream. I think there's a problem with uniformitarianism being treated dogmatically or axiomatically in the field of geology. The geological establishment, or mainstream, which was slow to accept Brent's work specifically due to the time collapse involved, is the sort of thing I would call a mainstream narrative. I made a video about narratives in science, so I won't go into detail here, but I think the concern for everyone mistrusting scientists in general is unwarranted. When I hear mainstream, it is often in the context of scientists trying to say something that goes beyond what we can all observe and repeat through experimentation. There are some things that science can tell us, and other things which they cannot tell us with much certainty. And it's okay to admit that. I think Craig Venter summarizes this idea precisely.
I disagree. We're not going to know the origin of life on this planet. We're generating hypotheses, and the only way to test those is to see if we can recreate those conditions and that origin on another planet, or witness that it did take place. There's some things we can do in science in terms of proving certain things about life we discover. Guessing what happened 4.2 billion years ago or 3.5 billion years ago, we can come up with a lot of good guesses. There's been a lot of good guesses floating around. It's impossible to prove it.
Since Professor Miano's video inspired the creation of this one, I wanted to thank him for keeping the conversation going, and also note that he does point out that there may be reasons to treat archaeology and history differently than other sciences when it comes to using terminology like mainstream. So kudos to him for making that important distinction. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed making it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.